Thank you, Samajit, and thank you, Chase. And yeah, first of all, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Professor Nagarajan. I'm truly honored to have his trust in inviting me to this privileged opportunity. And I also want to thank SICVM for tolerating, all my pestering, all my requests for the extra time and all those. I sincerely appreciate all your consideration. Moving on to the paper, the topic of this paper is about the evolution of enterprise systems. This paper, I developed in the backdrop of my book. The book is, named after the God Must Be Crazy, uh, and make enterprise great again. That's my I'm adapting the slogan from my previous president, whether you like it or not. Anyway, moving on to this a little bit about this paper initially. I mean, how many of you? Let me ask a question. I don't know whether you can answer. Or how many of you watched the movie "The God Must Be Crazy" or even heard about the movie? Um, Glad to see Sardigar. The point is, I'm a big movie buff. During my engineering days or even MBA days, I used to religiously go and watch all the Chiranjeevi and Nagarjuna movies, and then especially the first day of the release. And especially some of my favorite movies from back then was the Jilla Rowdy, the State Rowdy, the Gunda, what is the Muttames.
You're reminding me of those grand old days. Sorry, please go on.
No, I'm a big movie. But my point of my big movie buff, but after coming to States, it's not a. I don't have that luxury of watching the Chiranjeevi movies. I changed my taste, slightly differently. So I started watching, especially the classics and that kind of stuff. Even this movie I watched while I was in India back, and it was in the Doordarshan. I watched at least even after coming here several times. The thing I like about, I don't know how much you know about the God Must Be Crazy other than watching the movie. That is produced by an Ulisse, like a low budget producer out of South Africa. It was it initially ran, it was a failure initially in South Africa. But, so I think somebody picked up in Europe or some UK or somebody. It ran, since then, it ran continuously, especially in the West and even in Australia and many of those countries. Continuously ran at 300 to 500 days continuously in some of those theaters till the film got completely burned out. That it was the highest grossing movie till back in at least till 1980s, non Hollywood movie. This is my, I do have like again, I'm very passionate about some of this, like again, I find myself in that Bushman, in a way, when I was going through my own personal journey. I started in a way, I started my career as an equity research analyst after my MBA in finance and with Anand Rathi. So I'm always curious why the way the things are, how the system works. I'm always, like try to look underneath, under the hood and try to explore, why it is the way it is, especially why the West is the way it is. And I recently found an interesting book also about the mystery of capital. Why the capitalism is failing in the rest of the world. It's anyway. It's a topic for another presentation. So the point I'm trying to make is, this is I find myself in the shoes of if the Bushman is wearing the shoe. So I try to look everything from the perspective of my Eastern Coca-Cola bottle. So I try to look at the whole, the capitalism and the financial engineering personally I'm doing to feed my kids. I try to look at it from that perspective. So this paper is based on, I developed the book based on that paper. So based on this, the God Must Be Crazy movie from the Eastern Bushman perspective about the Western world, about the financial engineering going on. So I adapted this paper, from that, based on the book. Again, as Saumijit mentioned, this book is free, especially for the students. This book is for 13th and 14th Pacific Standard Time in US. You guys can download anywhere from the world, anywhere in the world. So already pretty close around not 100,000, 10,000, over 10,000 people already downloaded and read the book. Around, we do have around 50 something reviews already in Amazon. Anyway, another thing, about again, thanks for giving me, again, the lecture you're having the 40 minutes or 45 minutes. But unfortunately, I'm covering some of the very controversial topics. Each of these slides, I can go on for, maybe hours. There's a lot of meaning behind it, personally for meaning behind it. So, but what I may suggest, I highly recommend, if you like my presentation, I highly recommend you to go and, take advantage of the free book, or if you approach me, I can send you a copy also. So wherever, anyway, moving on to the next slide. One of my personal personal and professional growth came for working. I spent about a decade at Bachman Labs. That's a place where I only spend. The rest of the places I might spend maybe maximum couple of years. The rest of the companies organized. Many of my personal and professional growth came from knowledge transfer department of Bachman Labs. So typically, like in the rest of the most of the corporation is known as an IT department. Bob Bachman, he didn't like the word IT. He called it as a knowledge transfer. So I was associated with this department for about 10 years. And I learned, personally, I was responsible for about 16 out of 20 countries. Bachman operates through the various ERP and later on various EPM systems. I had the amazing privilege. Bob Bachman is the second generation. Bachman family is the CEO. Right now, he's in his 90s, and right now he's the chairman of the board of the company. He's very much passionate about the knowledge management. He's known as father of knowledge management. Even though I was at the very bottom of the ladder from the perspective of, he gave me the amazing privilege. First, I had while I was volunteering for PMI, I even hosted an event at PMI. That's how I connected him in a personal capacity. Later on, he gave me an opportunity even to present in Iran on most in the Sharif University. I think that's one of the world university on the most admired knowledge enterprise major conference. I had the privilege to give a keynote. Thanks to many of the case studies files slides coming from him. But unfortunately, because of the time limitation, I'll not be able to get into all the details. So moving on to the presentation, I'm going to look at from the perspective of to build my case. I'm going to look at first the evolution of the modern enterprise, which is maybe around 120 years. So if you look at the Dow Jones, so from the Dow Jones chart perspective, I'm going to cover from the rise, and in a way I'm portraying it as a fall of the enterprises in the Dow Jones perspective, and with especially all the financial engineering where I'm personally involved. So I'm going to give a little bit of picture from my Bushman Botel perspective, and I'm going to give a picture about it. Then I'm going to cover, if we don't think different, we are especially in the West, we are in a big way into trouble. The East is no way different. The India is, I don't think, the Lal Street is no way different. So we're going to get into big way trouble with all the Middle Kingdom coming up. Then I'm going to cover, to look back, to build back better. These enterprises, we need to look at what is like the roots of the evolution is primarily like the backbone systems we need to take. So I'm going to take a look at it, give a high level perspective of how the system evolved, especially from the modern enterprise perspective, and what is rotten, and how we need to build back better from the system perspective. Then I'm going to cover in the future of my core theme is about the future of the enterprise, how we need to think different, and what kind of future enterprise architecture we need. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to have the time to go through the case study. Hopefully, you guys may invite me back, later point for the EPM case study. So moving on to the paper, this is again, I'm sure you might have come across the Dow Jones charts. So personally, I tried to explore again from the modern, the evolution from the enterprises perspective. I looked at it. Dow Jones since the charting started in 1900, back in 1900. So those were the origins of the enterprise. The earlier on. Again, I'm talking about the modern enterprise. Again, the key reason I got into the even prior coming to the this Dow Jones. One of my my Peter, I don't know if you guys still follow in the MBA Institute the Peter Drucker books. Back in 25 years ago, the Peter Drucker was the management guru for us. So I found one of his quote. I think that came in the Fortune magazine in 2000. One of his quote back then was the corporation as we know it, which is 120 years old. He predicted back 20 years ago, or 20 plus years ago, it is not likely to survive next 25 years. He said, legally and financially, yes. For the namesake, yes. But not structurally and economic. That he predicted 20 years ago when the market was booming. So that raised me the curiosity, since he said, the corporation as we know it, which is 120 years. So I was trying to find out, again, I tried to dig back a little bit, the 120 years ago. That's when I found this, the Dow Jones chart I'm referring about. So since again, if you look at most of the exponential growth happened during the 1960s and 70s. That was a key turning point. That's when in the politically or economically, that's when who's the infamous U.S. President Nixon. Nixon got rid of we had a lot of financial issues back then. Got rid of the gold standard of the Bretton Woods standard. So we started printing the money. The U.S. Fed started printing money back then. He completely dealing from the gold standard. So primarily, primarily look from the system perspective. That is when around 60s and 70s, that's when the IBM launched the mainframe system. For next 30 years, till around 2000, the gold standard of the IT systems were the IBM mainframe system. So then came in in 2000, our mid 90s, soon, the West realized even IBM never thought it's going to system. Their system is they're going to use it for 20, 30 years. So the digit, the year digit they formed was 00. So the West thought, especially the everything is going to collapse on the January 1st, 2000, because the year is going to turn 00. So the whole world panicked. Thought, the airlines are going to crash, and again, all sort of, it was very interesting to read, back then, all kind of reporting about, I may treat it as the biggest blunder on in the business history. Personally, I'm a big beneficiary. Many of us, back then, with a little bit with the gray hair, and those who are especially in the IT side, we were fortunate to come here as a cyber coolies, to either to fix the mainframe code, the COBOL code, or in the ERP side. I came in the ERP side. So then in 2000, it started the whole, another set of revolution. But unfortunately, that's when the 9/11 happened, all that. We had the dot-com bust, there's a lot of the challenges happening back then. So the IT shifted from the ERP to the business intelligence perspective. Again, I'm going to come in the coming slides in detail. So then in 2008, the economic tsunami happened. That's when we started all kind of financial engineering. CFO's department, finance started taking the responsibility. IT CIO started normally, many companies started reporting to the CFO of the company. So they primarily look for the financial IT system from the financial engineering. That's when the initially came the corporate like business intelligence, then came the corporate performance management, then the business performance management. Finally, it transformed into the enterprise performance management. This is the era of the financial engineering. And this is where all kind of turbulence happen, especially that these I'm going to get into the details in the coming slides. So we're going to take a look at it as I mentioned, 120 years old, many of these companies. So I was curious to see how some companies are failing, why some companies are succeeding, how the overall the whole enterprise evolution, how the companies are formed, So when I noticed, during the first and second generation of the of this, the entrepreneurs, they primarily look at their company from the resilience engineering perspective. So they try to make it, bring a solid foundation for the company, and their focus is from the resilience perspective. Their focus is not simply on the making the few dollars extra. So they want to build a organization, enterprise.
Just 1 minute, sir. I would request everyone to kindly be on mute. Yes, sir. Sir, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So the focus is, but from the second generation onwards, the people, especially when it comes to the third generation, some companies goes bust, but many companies, they want to make the money, they're maybe a little bit lazy and they want to be on the beach. So they take the company to the Wall Street, or in an Indian scenario, in the Dalal Street, take it to the IPO. That's when the so-called, the professional management comes into the place. They bring high-profile CEO with the parachute options. So initially, they come with a very good perspective, but when they see the focus from the Wall Street or even the Dalal Street, their focus is on the quarterly profit. Many of the CEOs, the CFOs and the many C-level folks, their salary is more than the base pay. They get mostly from the stock rewards and that kind of the bonuses. Their remuneration is straight linked to their stock prices, how the stock is performing. So unfortunately, they're going to start taking, because of the Wall Street, they need to produce, they need to see every quarterly results. They started taking the shortcuts. That's when they started doing all kind of financial engineering. They started doing the financial engineering, again, initially with a good intention, total quality management, Six Sigma, and all those, project management, all those fancy stuff. But later on, it comes to the toxicity, supply chain management, transfer pricing, reverse mergers, mergers and acquisition, business process outsourcing, inversions, all the. In summary, the stock is going to do well, but you completely messed up with the resilience engine. You are primarily focused on doing purely on the financial engineering side. So finally the companies, they go and dry up. One fine morning they realize they're swimming naked. By the time the tide is going to go out, and that's when some, if they're lucky, some private PE leverage firms, they come and buy it, or they go declare Chapter 11. Some of these companies, and intellectually, some of those property vultures, they're going to come, especially nowadays, from China, they come and buy this corporation. That's a phase of typically the fate of and the many of the enterprise firms, with what I noticed. So moving on to the next slide. So especially in the current environment, and this is a report came out back in 2019. IMF predicted about over 40% of the corporations in the West, especially in the West, if any crisis happens, like in 2008 or even at the 9/11, if any crisis happens, over 40% of the Western corporations, they may not be in a position to even pay not just paying back they'll not be even in a position to pay back even the interest on the debt. So right now that we were very much in a situation last year with the COVID, but with all the printing of here in US alone, we printed around $5 to $7 trillion with the PPA money and with all kind of money floating coming to the market. This is artificially propped up all the companies. So even today, many of these companies, I don't know, you may know, they're hardly making any money. The government is funding all the money, and this is what exactly happening since 2008. Once U.S. lose the reserve status, or when China, Xi Jinping is going to tell pretty much clearly, I think he already communicated to the Biden, when we were not in a position to print the money, when something happens to the Reserve Bank, that's when the tide is going to go out, and many of 40, again, this is the IMF prediction, over 40% of the companies in US, they will not be able to pay the interest on their loan. So that's a crazy. This is not just in US. This is a situation in Europe. Everyone is printing the money, including China is printing. Europe is big way. They printed an at least equivalent amount in Europe. Japan is another crazy printing the notes. So once they stop printing the notes, that's when the tide is going to go out. That's when you're going to see all the skeletons in the closet and all who is swimming the naked. Many companies are unfortunately going to go bust. So let's take a look at the Western capitalistic perspective also. It may be I understand that India is still emerging, but just to give the picture about. So back in 1980s and 90s, we used to have around 8,000 companies, pretty close to around over 7,000 plus companies listed in the New York Stock Exchange. Once upon a time, New York Stock Exchange used to be the financial capital of the world. But we still act it as a financial capital of the world. But if you look at it, right now, do you know how many companies listed in the New York Stock Exchange or the stock exchanges in the US? It's little over 2,000 companies. Do you know how many companies were in China, listed companies were in China, or even the companies in China back in 1980s? Maybe just few hundred or few dozen companies. If you look at it now, do you know how many companies in China listed in the Shanghai Stock Exchange and Shenzhen and Guangzhou or in Hong Kong Stock Exchange? Pretty close to around 7,000 to 8,000 companies listed. Do you know who produces all the Chinese in Shanghai alone? If I read it right somewhere, there's more billionaires produced in Shanghai and some of those cities than the billionaire list, the list in US. So this is where unfortunately our cheese is moved. We realize pretty soon, that again the Indian. I understand the Indian situation is slightly different, but many of the Indian companies are very much linked to the US companies. At least many of you guys are either in the Banjara Hills or are related to one way or other, intertwined with many of these Western companies. Many of your IT offshoring and outsourcing, again, big way linked to that. This is going to, one way or other, it's going to affect also. It's pretty much, the Middle Kingdom, they're ready to take over the world pretty soon. They all already 2/3 of the world is already depending on. Just a second. How many more minutes I got? 35.
Sir, still 15 minutes are left.
It's okay, 15 minutes. Okay. Thank you. So in that perspective, again, I want to know, again, all the enterprise scenario. it is changing. It is unless if we bring the if we don't build back better, if we don't bring the resilience to the enterprises. Unfortunately, in the West, some extent, it's going to affect in other countries like India also, which is depending on many of the Western economy. It is going to affect the corporations, especially in the West, and and the rest of the world too. And this is where again the resilience, the relevance, the rigor, and the resilience is that is the core of the survival of the enterprises in the West. And we need to the stuff what we are doing, especially our leadership is doing, the C-level folks, and they're doing it, it's not working. They purely, many of them are doing, unfortunately, doing the financial engineering. So we need to completely think different. So we need to think we need to be a systemic thinker. We need to think in wholes. We need to create a new team structure in a new kind of an environment. We need to think out of the box, and we need to bring the innovation, the imagination, the relevance, the rigor, and the resilience. We need to bring the resilience engineering back, not the financial engineering. So to do that one, so we need to think. We need to understand how the system is in the first place, how the enterprises are built. Again, backbone of any enterprise is the systems. As you may remember from the Dow Jones chart, so that's a core. That is the reason many of these enterprises are the way it is, because they build the backbone. So we need to go back and look at how the enterprise backbone system, how it is evolved, and how it is evolved to the topic of the discussion, how it is enterprise performance management, which is needed for the future. So I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation from Steve Jobs. This is, like back in 1980s. Make sure that, okay, I'll let you listen and after.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
This is the time to think different. And this, by the way, there's just a little bit about the story behind this this ad. Back then, 1980s, the IBM's motto was think. So Steve Jobs brought this ad to counter it, think different. So we need to think different. So to understand, we need to understand the roots where we came from. So I'm going to take a look at the high level look at the evolution of to understand how the enterprises are the way we are right now. We need to look at from the evolution of the systems. And again, if you look at the 100-year Dow Jones chart, till around the 1970s and 80s, most of till the IBM came into the picture, most of the organizations, they were using the ledgers, pen and paper for capture the numbers, the transactions. So that from that point, especially with the IBM, the mainframe launch, so many, especially the larger corporations, they switched to the mainframe system. But I still remember back in after my MBA, I worked for Anand Rathi and Rathi Global Finance, and later on with the Andhra Cements. So many of these companies still the back office systems that we were using the pen and paper, the ledgers. Even I'm talking about in even 96 we're using. And then came to, like today, like again, nobody even heard about ledgers. So even today, like we all switched to since mid 90s or late 90s to around 2000s, our focus was primarily on the ERP systems. We moved to the ERP, more from the operational perspective, rather than from the operational planning perspective, and from the transaction systems. So then came, like again, as I mentioned earlier, then came to the the .com bust, and the 9/11, all those things exposed our underneath the issues. Then that's when the IT and initially started doing doing some sort of business intelligence analysis, trying to dissect all those things. Then especially with the economic tsunami in 2008, finance started taking over many of the IT stuff. They started they brought the enterprise performance, corporate performance management, business performance management, eventually enterprise performance management. That's when they started using all kind of financial engineering stuff. So anyway, eventually we need to get into the strategic excellence. So that's where the real opportunity is. So looking at a slightly different perspective. So initially, many of these systems were primarily focused on the mainframe systems, primarily focusing on collecting the data. So when it comes to the ERP, like the collection of the data, so percentage of the time, they spend, we started analyzing this data from the operational perspective. So from the EPM, when you look at it from the EPM perspective, so in the ideal scenario, like again, this is a decision make system. So we in the ideal EPM environment, we should focus most of our time, most of our effort on decision making and execution, especially within today's predictive analytics, AI, and robotics, automation, all those stuff we can come. But unfortunately, even according to the Gartner, it's slightly only 16% of the time is companies spending on this area, on the decision making. Still, most of the companies over 80% of the time, 84% of the time, they're still focusing on collecting the data and doing all kind of analysis, basic stuff. So we need to move from the data analysis to analysis to the predictive analytics, decision making mode. Just to give a high level picture about what is EPM. So the EPM in one word, like in my CFO suites of solution. That's a traditional, like that. These are the decision-making system for the C-level executives from the strategy perspective, or a financial close perspective, or they want to see how many widgets they sold in the past. This is the financial close comes into the picture. They want to see, if you want to make the share price this much high, or if they want to make this much profit, which area they need to focus on, the planning and forecasting. They need to look at from the perspective, they want to look at from the perspective of, like again, mergers and acquisitions, or if they want to make, like if they want to grow this company despite based on the mandate, they want to grow the company by 20% in 2 years, what kind of, strategic debt equity structure we need to take, what kind of mergers and acquisition is going to help on that perspective. Then the traditional, all the cost management also can be enabled. So around that, to do that one, you need to get the data from various transactional, the ERP kind of system. So to get the data, you need to do all kind of ETL and all kind of stuff. And you need to bring, like again, the larger the corporation, the messier the system. You need to have the master data kind of system to manage that one. So ultimately, they need to get all kind of fancy reports from the dashboarding or web interface, or the mobility analytics, all those things. This whole package is the EPM. Summary, like this, the C-level of the systems for the C-level decision making and execution. So why we need the EPM? Again, traditionally the ERP kind of system, the primarily focus is on the transactional data, or operational perspective, where it's not easy to implement or make the changes to the ERP kind of system, because it impact on so many different areas, again, political. But the most of the advantage we can get, especially the CFOs and the ROI, can get is especially in this in the area of enterprise performance management, where this is where they can the strategic knowledge excellence, this area. So we need to move from the data-driven to the strategic knowledge excellence. So let's take a look at it a little bit more on the times. How much more time I got?
Sir, you can,
You have
wrap.
5 minutes.
Sir, you can wrap up in a minute, sir, because we will give another 5 minutes for the Q&A session.
Okay. So I'll
Okay,
just rush through. So why we need to take a look at the business schools in Indian business schools need to take the EPM system. Traditionally, again, back then, I was doing my MBA or even engineering, the whole focus was on developing, I may put it, I'm sorry if I'm using a derogatory word, cyber coolies. The whole focus was on developing the IT developers or the kind of, all kind of financial wizard, I may call it financial engineers. But from there, but there is the bulk of the opportunity, the future opportunities around the strategic systems like enterprise performance management, C-suite kind of solution. This is where the most value-adding activity. This is where you need the organization like the business schools especially. Again, this is from the Gartner's perspective. The leaders are traditionally the leaders are the Oracle and the SAP. I don't fully agree with this chart, but I'm a big way betting on the OneStream system. This is a platform kind of system. So this is where the futuristic opportunity. In summary, the current state of enterprises are in a way washed up in a Frankenstein system. Over 75% of the architecture today are built by, I may call it as a frogs in the web, by especially the larger the corporation, the messier the system is. And there's so much politics, politically between IT, finance, and the implementation part, offshore vendors, and all big four organizations pushing all kind of PowerPoint presentation. That many cases, like especially with the larger corporations, the enterprise implementations are completely screwed. Again, most of these dysfunctional organizations with the reverse mergers and tax-effective supply chain management, business process outsourcing, it's completely. And many of these systems, what they're using is developed in Oracle or CSV. These kind of systems are predated to the worldwide web era. It's developed in late 90s or in the early 2000s. I call it as a pre-World War. It's not meant for the digital architecture. We need to take a look at different perspectives. So we need to, in my point, this is from the Dwight Eisenhower. He's a 34th president of the US. He's commander-in-chief of during the Second World War. So you need to think different from the EPM perspective. If you need the enterprise piece, so we need to have literally an architecture war on the systems. So again, we need to focus from futuristic perspective, enterprise architecture. The whole IT scenario is completely changing. It is more moving from the operationals to the predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, robotic intelligence, and all the robotic automation in the cloud. The whole IT industry's landscape is completely changing. So as the accounting and the business and all those scenarios are changing, especially with the bots and AI robotics coming into the picture. This is the prediction back in 2017 by McKinsey. He predicted there's going to be a lot of displacement, 75 to 375 million occupations they need to change by 2030. But unfortunately, this again 2070. The last year alone, the US alone lost around 40 million jobs just in US. So as I think in India also lost a fair share. Many of the jobs, unfortunately, it's not coming back. So we need to take a completely different look. So as again, from the project, the execution of many of this, not just on the EPM perspective. So we need to look at rather than looking at the orthodox project management methodology or PMBOK methodology, so we need to look at them completely different. What is best for the project, best for the organizers. We need to look at the hybrid agile kind of approach. So finally, so we need to look at the overall evaluation of the system. Again, with the ERP, we will focusing on the transactional system from the strategic excellence from the EPM perspective. And unfortunately, in the COVID era, even in the post-COVID era also, we are going to work, most of us are going to work remotely. So it is going to be one of the big challenges is going to be the team empowerment. As Bob Buckman predicted, 90% of the knowledge is residing in the heads of the people. Only 75% of the like knowledge is written. I mean, the management is focusing on something written down, which is less than 10% of the knowledge. So we need to look at coming out with the team empowerment and the knowledge enterprise. This is my case studies about this one. Unfortunately, we don't have to go through the case study. Again, ultimately, we need to achieve the knowledge enterprise status. So with that one, again, unfortunately, we don't have the time for the case study. Hopefully, you guys invite me back. Later point of time, we can cover the case study at that time. Again, it's truly my honor, and I want to thank Professor Natarajan and the whole SIM team for giving me the amazing opportunity. Again, I just nibbled a few topics on my book. If you like my presentation, I highly recommend you to download the free copy of my book and let me know your perspective and thoughts. With that one, thank you. I'm sorry if I took extra time.
Thank you, sir, and I'm sorry because of the time constraints you had to quickly go through it. I would quickly like to invite the chairs for a Q&A session if there is any.
Saji, first and foremost, I would like to congratulate you on the passion which you have displayed in your entire presentation, and that probably is the soul of your book as well. The God Must Be Crazy. You dig deeper into the data, 120-year-old data and Dow Jones, how it moved and all that. A little bit of evidence on the terminologies which you have used. Like, for example, somewhere you say resilience engineering, somewhere financial engineering. And then you have made observations both related to certain problems and related to certain solutions. So can you quote specific evidences that why are you talking about these problems or why are you talking about these solutions?
The evidence is right in front of us. You're seeing, again, I'm not a keen observer on the Indian stock market. You might have experienced last year around the same time, March, April time, how much our stock market went down. I think I've seen including in Dalal Street. We have experience on the back in 2008. It took 2 years to, not 2 years, 3-4 years to come back to the market, the stage. With all the money, again, 2008, 2010, about that time, I think they printed only $3 trillion. Right now, we printed just in less than a year alone, we printed around, US alone printed around $5 to $7 trillion. That is completely, dislocated, deforming the market. You're seeing all kind of crazy. If you look at it, even some of the share like GameStop and it's going. Some of the companies supposed to go bust, they go all the way high. It's all kind of craziness you're seeing it. And I don't know, again, politically also, if you look at it, the call which the Biden and Xi Jinping had, it took about 2 hours. I don't think it was a very pleasant call they had. So you're going to see all kind of consequences of lack of resilience. Especially I'm coming back to the financial engineering side, the excessive financial engineering. Seen 40 million people lost their job just in a month, one or couple of months time last year, and most of them they didn't come back to that. So we completely lost our resilience. Again, the West has, the most of it's all propped up by the quantitative easing, the money printed by the government,
Saji, there are no two opinions about the overheating of the stock markets. So at the macro level, your observations definitely hold true. I'm just trying to understand the causal link which you are trying to establish between enterprise performance management systems and the phenomena which you have just described.
enterprise performance management, the cause and effect, again, the enterprise performance management is the tool which is going to enable the enterprises to execute their strategy. And again, if you look at a knife, in a butcher's hand, that knife has a different meaning than the knife in a doctor's hand. The same way, unfortunately, the enterprise performance management, it was abused for the excessive financial engineering. If we do it in the right way, we do it strategically, we focus from the resilience perspective, that's when, again, all the futuristic opportunity. That's where, again, if you look at the Eastern way of the thing, the Chinese way of thinking, so they're looking for more from the resilience perspective. They're the engineering perspective, versus in the West, we are looking from the financial engineering perspective. So again, the same knife.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay from me.
Thank you.
That's it from my side. Yeah.
Saji, appreciations to begin with. It's been wonderful sitting and listening to you. First of all, thank you, because you gave me a new dimension to which the research question that I had for a long time. Can we develop a company life cycle like the way we have industry life cycle? That question is different, and you gave a different dimension to it. I should thank you first for that, and hopefully I'll get in touch with you to seek some clarifications on that at some time in future.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Yeah. I've got two questions and one observation.
Sure.
First question is, you gave a diagram on how the companies move from first generation to second generation, and then they go into the hands of professional management, etc. So I'd like to ask, what is the sample size that you? This one. The next.
One second. Give me my. Yeah.
Next one.
This is.
And the next one. This is the one. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what is the sample size for you to come up with this, let's say, hypothesis?
Okay, let me put it this way. I didn't, if I may take, I didn't do it in a purely an academic perspective. This is,
Please go ahead. That's based on your observations.
This is strictly based on my, I don't know whether you can see all my gray hair. I don't know whether you can see all my scars. I do it for the past over 2 decades. I do this stuff, especially all these stuffs which you're talking about. I do it for living. Started with, after my engineering, I started in the total quality, then moved on to the all kind of financial.
Okay, so that's the question one. I got the answer.
Yeah. And this is strictly based on.
Second question
this is, if I may add, this is why I opened up and I put it as a book, so I can get collect more data. Selfishly. Okay. Sorry.
So the second question is more on the lines of my co-chair. You gave this IMF financial stability. You quoted IMF financial stability report, and you were saying that this one it will be difficult once the central banks go out of the scheme to print the currency. That will be a death knell to the companies, so to speak. Yeah, right. So is this because I want your opinion here? Is this because at the macro level, the central banks have moved away from the gold standard, and the paper currency that you have has no intrinsic value today?
I don't know. I think you're calling from India, right? So if you look at it, if you got a dollar note, you can see there's a statement on the top: "In God's we trust." Okay, they don't even trust the dollar, whatever the currency, even including the Indian currency, what do you call it, don't even have a paper. don't even have a paper value. It is because of, again, right now the US is, again, this is the larger conversation. This is about the book. This book about, this is the reason we are sitting on the US can print the money. The rest of the folks, some extent Europe can print the money. China also can print the money. Not much enough for the Indians. There's a reason. There's just a lot of reasoning. Yeah. I'm sorry. Am I answering your question or yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the point is, right now, because the US is on the top, we can print all the, we are the reserve currency of the world. We can print, there's a currency value to that word, and we can print the money, and we can artificially hide, many of the inefficiencies with the quantitative easing or like the PP initiative, they come out with, like everything is falling up. So once the money printing dries up, it is when the tide goes away, it is going to expose all the skeletons in the closet, or it's going to show who is swimming naked. And many of these companies, they'll not be even able to pay this is, again, it's not I'm just quoting from IMS. They'll not be even able to pay their interest on the loan. So, am I answering to your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes. Yes. That's it, Sanjay. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you for reminding me of those golden days of standing in the queue and buying a ticket for the first day.
Thank you.